Hello everybody and welcome to another Top 5 Wednesday. Top 5 Wednesdays was started by Lainey over at Ginger Reads Lainey, and she opened it up a couple months ago for everybody to do. So it's completely open. I'll leave a link for the Goodreads group as well as Lainey's channel down below. This week's topic is quite literally perhaps one of my favourite ones we've ever done, which is the top 5 opening lines to books. I love opening lines in novels because, I mean, these are what grab you. We talk about things grabbing us from the first page, and oftentimes we mean the first line. Sometimes it is just the first line. There is at least one book on here which I read solely based on the fact that I adored its opening line. Let's get to it. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were happy to say they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. That is the opening line to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. I'm sure everybody knows this line by now. This line is really, really great because I think it's a good indication of author style and of the narrative voice we're going to be getting throughout the entire series. There's a cheekiness to it, and there's a playfulness to it, but there's an edge. You see who the Dursleys are as people. Perfectly normal, thank you very much. They're going to be very close-minded, fairly intolerant people, and they're going to be very obsessed with image. I mean, that's something you can get from the first line. We haven't even really met these characters. Everything else that comes afterward about the Dursleys really just seems to reinforce this for us. Midway on our life's journey, I found myself in dark woods, the right road lost. That is the opening lines, in this case translated by Robert Pinsky, of The Inferno by Dante Alighieri. The Inferno being the most well-known and most famous part of his epic poem trilogy, The Divine Comedy. My copy here, as you can see, is actually a bilingual translation, so it has the original Italian in it. Sure, I can try and read that for you. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi trovai per una selva oscura, che la diritta via era smarrita. I really, really like this, both the translation and the original Italian. The terza rima, which is obviously this very unique rhyming and lyrical scheme that Dante used for this. But the opening line is really good because it just sort of sets you off to know this is going to be very dark, it's going to be very moody, and we're basically dealing with someone who's going through a midlife crisis. I mean, if you have to look at it any way, this is an epic novel of a novel. It's an epic poem dealing with one guy's midlife crisis. Let's be honest, that's all it is, and yet it's so incredible, the Inferno, and I always love that opening line, and it creates this image in my head of a guy on a road in the middle of dark woods. Anything that can create a really good image in my head is something I'm going to like very much. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Oh, Jane. Bless you, Jane. I like to say to people that the opening line of Pride and Prejudice, to me, is the make or break point in knowing whom is a discerning reader and whom isn't. If you're a discerning reader, you know that line is one of the most snarky, sarcastic-filled opening lines probably ever in fiction. Jane Austen is not only telling you exactly what this novel is going to be about, it's going to be about rich men, it's going to be about marrying rich men, but it's also going to be a novel in which she highly critiques the society that they live in. And the entirety of Pride and Prejudice is spent with Jane Austen really just, I mean, how do I properly say this? Blowing holes in the society that she's a part of. She knows exactly which little bits to hit at and say, look at this. Seriously, look at this. Look at what we're doing. You tell me it's okay. Now, is this also a really beautiful kind of love story and something you love to read? Absolutely. You can read it just at face value and get a ton of enjoyment out of it. But this book, just from that opening line for me, I was going, ooh, temper, temper, somebody's got something to say. And she does. This novel, if you ever study it, really study it and look at the text, is brilliant. Rage. Goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Archelaus, murderous doomed, that cost the Achaeans countless losses, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls, great fighters' souls, but made their bodies carrion, feasts for the dogs and birds, and the will of Zeus was moving toward its end. That's where this particular translation ends its first sentence, and that is the Iliad, as translated by Robert Fagles, which is my personal favourite translation of this epic poem. Of Homer's two poems, the Iliad is my favourite. I know, we all read the Odyssey and we all love it, and I love the Odyssey too, but I adore the Iliad. It's one of my favourite books of all time. This book I could read forever and ever. I always loved this translation because I read that opening line, and I tried to give you as like epic and crazy sounding a reading that opening line as I could, because that is how I heard it in my head. And you're hearing rage and carrion and murderous and all these really powerful, forceful words, and I'm like, oh, we're in a war story about a hero who's got an anger management issue. Love it. The beauty of really both of Homer's epic poems, that he pretty much tells you what's going to happen in the opening, and that's standard. It's like Shakespeare does the same thing. Two households both alike in dignity and fair Verona, where we lay our scene. I mean, he's going to tell you, that whole opening tells you what's going to happen in Romeo and Juliet. And Homer does a lot of the same thing with his opening lines. I have just always loved it so much. It's very powerful and very evocative to me. Finally, this last line is the one I mentioned earlier where I said, this book, I have loved it from the moment I first read its opening line. It was an opening line that gripped me. It's an opening line I love, 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 love. And it's the reason this book is, I mean, if I really only could save one book in a fire, this might be the one I save, because I love it so much. A surging, seething, murmuring crowd of beings that are human only in name, for to the eye and ear they seem naught but savage creatures animated by vile passions and by the lust of vengeance and of hate. That is the opening line to The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Orczy. Quite literally probably one of my favourite books of all time. That opening line is setting the scene in Paris 1792, so we know we're in the French Revolution, we're in the Reign of Terror, and we're at the guillotine. I always loved that line because, I mean, surging, seething, murmuring crowd of beings. Just saying it to me evokes the image that Baroness Orczy is trying to tell to you. I see this crowd. I can feel the wildness of it. It's just so good. Well, that's all from me for my Top Wife Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed it, and so until next time, cheers.